Hi, if you're working with video streaming, you've probably already realized there are a lot of terms and acronyms involved. And today we are going to go over some of those terms and discuss the journey that Amara Graham has had as our new Director of Developer Relations in becoming familiar with some of those terms. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
So the two big terms I think we should start with that cover a lot of this, broadcast versus playback. So when you were learning these terms, what did broadcast mean to you?
Right, so this was really my first step into anything video, whether it was live streaming video or just video on demand. And one of the terms I kept coming across was broadcast. And when I think of broadcast, I think of it more in the traditional nightly news type broadcast. It's a 30-minute segment, it's a happening, and then it's over and done with. What I slowly realized, though, was broadcast is really the act of capturing video. So just like we're here, sitting here around cameras, this is broadcast. The act of getting that video, starting off that glass-to-glass process, getting the video out to the users. And once I realized that broadcast was really an industry term, searching for things, looking for any sort of tutorial, any sort of help guide, broadcast was the way to go. It wasn't just, capture this, capture that. Broadcast really got me to what I needed and the information that I needed to, again, start this process of end to end,
right,
glass to glass.
Great. And then obviously on the other side of broadcast, you have the viewer and you have playback. So what does playback mean in the video industry?
Right. So playback was like the hardest term for me to grasp just because I thought it was in the past. And I was like, well, what does this have to do with live video streaming? It's live. Why are we doing something in the past? But again, I realized that playback, an industry term. You're using a player to have your video consumed by your end user, your customer, your viewer, and that's what you do. You play back in a player for your users to see your stream. Right.
It does get confusing, and I do see that a lot in our forums where people can refer to it in a video on demand situation where they said, we had a problem with the playback, and they are referring to it in the past.
Right.
But when it comes to live stream, playback could be right now, what's happening right now.
Right, and it's so important to really understand these terms, and I mean, this is part of the reason why we're doing this video, is if you don't understand the terminology that you're using, you can really just be confused from step one, right out the gates. So for me, coming with an engineering background in something other than the video space, if you give me technical terms for programming languages, I'm there, I got it.
Right.
But suddenly I'm trying to figure out, okay, I need to understand what playback means so I can find the technical pieces that I need to implement to actually do the playback.
Right, and a lot of people use them in a lot of different ways. So once you get the basic foundation of the definition, you're off and running.
Exactly.
So I think the next one that would be interesting to talk about is a codec. It's sort of two words combined into one. So it's encoding and it's decoding. So codec, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, so I think this was, again, really interesting coming at it through this new video lens, again, new to me. So typically when we talk about codecs, they're either lossy or lossless. Lossless is probably what I was the most familiar with. And the analogy or the example that I like to use for lossless is with PDFs or with compressing things down like PowerPoint presentations. Sometimes you can get huge images, you get them in a file, and then you want to try to send that. It's like, no, I'm sorry, that's gigs worth of data that you're trying to, shove into an email or something like that. So that is an example of something that's lossless. So when I send my huge PowerPoint over, I've compressed it down. When it gets to the recipient, they're able to unzip that file and see all of the information. We don't necessarily have that luxury with video because the video files are just so big. Yeah. So we have to take a lossy approach, which means that there is going to be some data that gets disregarded in the process of compressing it down. Right. And the really cool thing about codecs is they're going to make choices that are hopefully not visible to the user, and the user being the person who's watching the stream, consuming the stream.
Right.
And that to me is really fascinating because I think of these huge video files, and there's tons of different colors and different scenes and different things happening. The metadata can also be quite large. How are these codecs making the right choices so that the viewers don't see it?
Right. No, it is. I think it's real. It is. It's really cool. And so Codec then, it takes this very large video broadcast file and it compresses it. So that's part of the codec's first job.
Right.
And then it's going to decide if you can use a lossy or a lossless format. And I believe that it does choose on its own. It has the intelligence to know what data to disregard that is not noticeable to the human eye. So if you're watching the video stream, you won't even know that it's kind of gotten rid of some of that data.
Right. So fundamentally, it's an algorithm. So it was designed to make certain choices. There are certain codecs that are going to work for certain use cases that may not work for others. And it's really about understanding your audience, your content, your overall workflow and the delivery mechanism to start making those choices. I think throughout the video process or the live video streaming process, you can make choices that may impact your delivery farther down the road. This is one of those where you could make a choice with your codec that your users could potentially see. But if you're just trying to get a video to them, maybe it's ultra low latency, something like just on a mobile device, you want them to be able to just view any sort of content, you could make choices that maybe pull more information, disregard more information just to get it to them faster.
Gotcha. So it's know your audience and know that there's a lot of codec choices involved. Okay, great. All right. Another term that I wanted to talk about is transcoding, because I work in the forums here a lot at Wowza, and I see a lot of people use transcoding as an umbrella term. And it actually has a very specific definition. So transcoding technically means to actually change from one codec to another. But a lot of people, again, they do sort of use it, I've noticed in the industry, to cover transmuxing and transrating. So I just kind of wanted to quickly dive into the difference between those three.
Right.
So we've gone over transcoding. Again, it's actually changing from one codec to another. And then you have transmux and transrate. Did you want to quickly explain what those are?
So I'm going to try to do the best that I can here. I know that transmux is the different protocols. So making sure that you have, again, you've made some of those choices at some point in your workflow. You need to make sure that it's the right protocol for your delivery mechanism. Right. For transrate, like so many different trans rates. For transrate, you need to be conscious of the bit rate. Again, making choices on your delivery mechanism, the players that you're potentially using, the platforms that you're potentially using. Right. You want to make sure that it's compatible with the experience that you want and compatible with the platform that you want. Right. And I can totally understand why people bucket kind of everything under transcoding, because it is kind of one of those terms where you're like, oh, well, it's got all those trans words in it, right? You're doing all of those things.
One size fits all term, yeah.
But it's really, at least the way that I've kind of looked at it, it's really a two-step process. And I think it's also important that people know that this is potentially optional depending on the workflow that they have. Right. So sometimes you're good to go. Sometimes you already have it in the right format. You already have it in the right resolution, the right bit rate.
Just send it through.
And you can just send it on through. And I think people will get hung up on this too when I describe, there's 6 steps to a live streaming process. And they're like, well, I didn't do all 6 steps. Like, well, some of them are optional. This, I think, is one of those.
Right. I think for surveillance cameras, a lot of times that's a single pass-through stream. You don't have to do a lot of the transcoding for that. But I think a really good example to share with everyone is the transmuxing. For a lot of cameras, Wowza will ingest RTMP as the format. But if you want to reach like a larger audience around the world, HLS seems to be the go-to format. It's easy for a lot of people to view that format on a lot of different devices. So very common for people to transmux from RTMP to HLS, just to give an example of that one. And then transrating too, I think, is really one that you do have the choice to go into Wowza and change the bit rates of your streams, because if you have someone watching a stream and the network conditions are bad, the player will have the intelligence to go to a lower bit rate stream, but it has to have access to these different renditions of the stream. So you could actually have all different bitrate renditions of that one stream, which I think is so interesting that the player can automatically know which one it wants to switch to.
Right, and I think we've seen this with our customers or the developers that are coming to us. They're already saying things like, hey, I know my users are not going to have a great network connection. And we're already seeing them kind of ask, what can I do to make their experience better? And this is one of those things that we kind of point them to.
Right. So that is just the beginning of several terms and acronyms, but we will visit again and go over some more in the future. I hope that was helpful to you. And that's it for today. Thanks for being here explaining that.
Thank you.
See you next time.